turn it on?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Is it growing out of some grains?
Carrying on.
We're getting some feedback, so I just wanted to make sure.
There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Sid's daughter gave me something to read.
I'm aware of that.
You know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, thank you.
Just let me know.
Thanks, Bush.
יש כוכבים שאורם מגיע ארצה, רק כאשר הם עצמם עבדו ונם. There are stars up above. So far away we only see their light, long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people we loved. Their memories keep shining brightly ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us. As we live our days, these are the ways that we remember. From Psalm 121. Esainai el harim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'em Adonai, ose shamayim, shamayim. Shamayim ve'aretz. A song for ascents. I turn my eyes to the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your guardian will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your guardian. Adonai is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your life. Adonai will guard your going and coming, now and forever. Shalom, my name is Rabbi Alan Finkel, and I am honored to lead the service on behalf of the Nelko family. As we honor the passing of Sidney Louis Nelko, the son of Samuel and Chasia Nelko ni Reutenberg, Shlomo ben Shalom v'Chasia, who left us this past Friday afternoon, August the 5th, 2022, the 8th day of Av in the Hebrew year 5782, at the age of 91 at the Simkin Center, peacefully after a long illness. Sidney, or Sid, was predeceased by his parents, and as well in 2020 by Gwen, his truly beloved wife of 59 years. One of 5 children, he also sadly experienced the passing of his brothers Max Nelko and Ernie Nelko and his sister Sonia Yaffe only 1 month ago. He is survived by his sister Claire Breslaw and his brother-in-law Paul Granovsky. Sid also brought a new generation into the world, and he is survived by his daughter Marnie Altman, who lives in Vancouver, and her son Trevor, and his wife Rachel, and their two sons Tristan and Dylan in Minneapolis, and I should have mentioned Marnie's son Ashton as well. Sidney is also survived by many nieces and nephews on both sides of the family, and he leaves behind so many close friends, patients, co-workers and colleagues, and more distant family who gather here and online, both to mourn his loss and to celebrate the gifts that Sid brought into our lives by his very presence. We are fortunate in this pandemic lull to be able to gather here and online, but while the pandemic has given us opportunities to connect in ways that we would never have thought possible, there is a hard reality as well, that COVID has unfortunately played too big of a role in the life of this family. Sid lost his beloved wife Gwen to COVID in October 2020, and travel restrictions did not allow his children to attend the funeral. They watched online. Sid himself tested positive 1 week later and suffered serious post-COVID medical conditions, which led sadly to this day. Today we accompany Sid to his final resting place in this physical world, most appropriately right beside Gwen, his friend and partner, who Sid proudly named as the two lovebirds. Marnie tells of his last hours, where he was unconscious and restless, and a music therapist entered the room, and he sang Blackbird. Sid's breathing calmed, everyone sang and cried, and Marnie held one of her father's hands and told him that Gwen was there holding his other hand. And so it was that he passed in peace, and we can imagine them together again. In Judaism, there are 7 acts of loving kindness, Gemilut Chasadim, and the first 2 involve death. Over the past 2 days, our attention has been only on the first act of loving kindness, accompanying and then witnessing Sidney Nelko's final journey from the moment of his passing until this moment as he reaches his final resting place. And he does so framed by our most time-honored Jewish traditions, ashes to ashes and dust to dust. First, a simple and beautiful act of Todah, ritual washing at the Chesed Shalemus, and now here laid to rest in a simple wooden casket, constructed only with pegs and dowels, no metal hardware. Everything returning to ashes and to dust, reminding every one of us that no matter how we lived our lives, no matter how rich the titles or our deeds that we may have accumulated in our lives, we are equal in death. It is today, literally here at graveside, where we will complete this first act of loving kindness, first with our words and then our prayers, and finally, as we cast earth together, the final act in Sidney's physical journey in this world. It will be at that point that we will move to our next act of loving kindness, and that of comforting the mourners. But this is the time, while we are still in Sid's presence, for us to share the story of his life, and for us to tell our stories about him, so that we all come to appreciate that Sidney has not only left a mark on all who knew him, but how he in turn has made a mark on the world. I want to express my appreciation for the time spent with Marnie and the wonderful stories she shared with me about the incredible values he lived his life by, the values he instilled in his children, the joy he had in his grandchildren, his profound connection and pride in his Judaism, and his love of the workplace, his staff, his colleagues, his patients. I will first tell Marnie's story on her behalf, and then invite Trevor to add his stories as well, and finally Moshe Flachman will add some more words from Marnie. Sidney was born in Winnipeg to parents born in Russia and Poland, one of 5 children. What Samuel and Chasia brought with them and what they instilled in Sid were not just their Jewish traditions and values, but a passion for education, which seemed to be so much part of our Jewish DNA. And that is where Sidney thrived. He was from all accounts beyond brilliant, a genius, a certified member of the Mensa Club. He had a photographic memory, literally able to recall word for word anything he had ever read. And as Marnie describes it, there was literally nothing that he did not know, including offhand details about miscellaneous monkeys in Africa. His interests were in every field. He was joyful, and he was always singing and dancing. There was one thing he was bad at, though, Marnie acknowledged, and that was anything to do with sports. And with that great mind, he chose medicine, completing his medical degree here in Winnipeg in 1957, and then traveling to Philadelphia to complete a specialization in family medicine. And it was while he was away, deepening his medical education, that his life would take an incredible turn on a visit back to Winnipeg. A friend of Sid's mother and a friend of Gwen's mother set up a blind date. And that was that. They really did become attached to each other as the lovebirds, but even more, Marnie describes them as being of one soul. And this was the home that she and Trevor grew up in. She says there was just magic and joy and laughter. He told jokes and danced and acted silly, while her mother was always laughing, freilich, and playing little jokes on him, just to get him to laugh. There was no chaos or conflict or problems, and Marnie recalls others finding that hard to believe. But it was real. It was very real. They created a home that was wonderful to visit. It was a split level, and Marnie would have her friends on one level, Trevor would have his friends on another level, and Sid and Gwen would be entertaining their friends on the third. And this was a family that loved to sit together for all 3 meals every day, with parents that went out of their way to make sure that that happened. And Sid attended all of their activities, even with his very busy professional life. Sid was, of course, a doctor, a family practitioner, and this too absolutely animated his life. Early in his career, he was actually, not surprisingly, incredibly eclectic in how he approached his medical profession. He had grown up in the North End and chose to set up his first medical practice at Hartford in Maine, behind the Hartford Drugs. And that would, at Hartford Drugs. Give me a moment here. But he also joined the Canadian Armed Forces Medical Corps, where he started off as a lieutenant and eventually was promoted all the way up to becoming a major. At various points in his career, he also worked with the City of Winnipeg Health Department, the federal government as immigration and medical officer, and with the province, with the medical examiner's office, which is something he carried on for many, many years afterwards. But it was in the early 70s that something really changed for him. This is when he established a medical practice at the Garden City Shopping Center with the Garden City Medical Clinic. And this was the absolute social and shopping epicenter of the Winnipeg's North End. And Dr. Nelko thrived in being the Jewish family doctor to Winnipeg's North End Jewish community. And he brought to his practice the person he was at home. Mickey Mouse posters adorned his office walls. He adored cartoons and always wore Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse pins on his jacket when he was at work. He was kid-friendly. His practice was kid-friendly. He was absolutely loved by his patients, and there was always gifts being dropped off at his home. But more than that, he delivered multiple generations of babies into so many families. One of his quiet joys was covering the fridge door in his home with all those baby photos, reminding him every day and reminding his family every day of the beauty of those first moments of life, the moments of creation. Later, after the kids left home, Sid and Gwen started to travel more, especially tied into the medical conventions that he loved to attend. In their later years, Gwen started to suffer from dementia. And as Marnie describes it, this is where her father really shone, and where she really saw what love looks like. He immediately became Gwen's caregiver and took this on with joy. He was considerate, spoke to her as if nothing had changed. They had their own little language and always spoke to each other, to others about each other only as we, never she or I. His love for her never wavered. These are the things that marked Sidney Nelko in this world, and it was clear where it all came from. He was steeped in Jewish tradition, in his Jewish beliefs, and a true sense of a relationship with God. For many years, until Gwen's health declined, he was an active member of the Shaarey Zedek congregation, attending Shabbat services every week, he and Gwen together. He was above all a profoundly ethical person who saw only the good in others, maybe realizing, or maybe not realizing, that everyone around him saw him in exactly the same way. I'd like to invite Trevor to come up for his words.
First of all, thanks everyone for being here today. Obviously, it's a testament to my dad and my mom and our family that you all came out today. So first of all, thank you for being here. A couple of comments before I start on just talking about my dad. The spirit of my dad, I think, is here in two ways today, not only with all of you, but for Rochelle and I. If you knew my dad at all in detail, he had a very small tolerance to temperature comfort. Maybe 70 degrees, and he might say, like today, it's too cloudy. Oh, no, maybe there's a little sun. There was always something too windy, too cloudy, too cold, too warm, and we'd always joke around about that. So today is actually a Sidney Nelko kind of day. It's beautiful, it's perfect. We're blessed that we have this great weather. It's not too hot, not too cold. The second thing is when Rochelle and I checked in our hotel room, if anyone knows, my father's birthday is April 19th, 1931. Rochelle and I checked into our room today. What room were we given? 419. That's not by accident. That's just unbelievable. So you never overlook the things that happen in your life. I wrote some things about my dad and my thoughts over the last couple of days, and the title of this is Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad. And these are the things that, as I reflect on my relationship with him, what I'm thankful for. For bringing me into your family. For being married to Mom for 59 years. For bringing Marnie into our family. For being a great role model in our home and in the field of medicine. For your sense of humor. He had a great one. For taking time and our family on travel experiences, not only here in Canada, but in the United States. For teaching me to be independent. For taking me to your office on weekends and allowing me to watch you work. Not doing anything medical, but watching what he did in terms of files and making notes and having conversations. For being the unofficial team doctor for any sports team that I was on. Hockey, baseball, football, basketball. He was the unofficial guy. Doc Nelko, can you come look at this guy? Yes. For showing our family how to be passionate about your education and your career. He was extremely passionate about those two things, and it was how he lived his life. For giving me the guidance to follow my hockey career to the University of Minnesota, I thank him for that. For his blessing and my mom's blessing to marry Rochelle and bring her into our family. For our many trips and his trips, both for us up here to Winnipeg and for him and my mom to come down to Plymouth, Minnesota. For showing us his incredible skill in trivial pursuit, except in the sports categories. Everything else, he knew every answer. For always being available for a phone call. For being a great Zeta to Tristan and Dylan, as they will always remember his stories. For his surgeon hands in giving our family the flu vaccinations. He had soft hands and he did it with a smile. For his compassion and warm heart. For being a great physician to generations of families. For being with us for 90 plus years. And finally, thank you for being my dad. Thank you.
Moshe?
Hi everybody, I'm going to read something that Marnie wrote. Can everybody hear me? No? I don't like microphones. I'll just talk louder. Can you hear me now?
Moshe, there's
Very
people
good.
online who want to hear as well. So
Oh,
you
okay.
guys picked up both ways.
Okay, here we go. A few years ago, when my father was going through many extremely difficult transitions in his life, including my mother's illness, my father told me there was something he wanted people to know at his funeral. Considering how hard things have been for him at the time, I held my breath, unsure what he would say. It's been a wonderful life, he said. Anyone who knew my father knew what a brilliant man he was, having the honor of having him as a father and knowing him as deeply as I did. Just want to remind you that this was Marnie writing this. I was struck by the incredible simplicity of the beauty of this statement that said so little, yet said it all. Within this nugget is the wisdom of my parents' way of life, It is my hope that in my Father's honor you will be enlightened in your own life by this light, as I have had the great blessing to have been. My parents were one soul, and in their presence life was always beautiful, positive, and joyful. Our home was always filled with love and laughter and peace. I never heard a negative word, and they didn't complain or talk badly about anyone. When I left home as a young adult, I was rudely awakened to the fact that life was in fact not always beautiful and positive, that there was pain and suffering too, and that people were not always acting out of kindness and integrity. So how had my parents managed to bypass these hardships? My father's simple parting words hold the answer. According to the deep teachings of Todah, the way we see affects the things we are viewing. Someone with pure intention creates a positive energy when looking at something, and the opposite holds true as well. My father was a religious man, but also a man of science. This belief aligns not just with Jewish belief, but also with the basic laws of quantum theory, wherein the observer affects the observed. We don't see things the way they are, we perceive things the way we are. When you see each moment as the true gift that it is, life becomes a gift. Upon seeing something negative, we need to go back into ourselves where the light is being absorbed and change the refraction. If we can imagine something as being positive, we can choose to see it that way. And when we see it that way, it becomes that way. When we do this, we perform our earthly duty and what God created for us. God gave each of us a soul, which is a candle that He gives us to illuminate our surroundings with His light. We must not only illuminate the insides of homes, but also the outside, the world at large, and we must do this in all circumstances. When a righteous person such as my father departs this world, the light of his soul in all worlds is even more present than it was in his lifetime. So in this moment of passing, instead of focusing on our loss, let us embrace his great wisdom and allow the positivity of love, the positivity and the love of his soul to flow into our hearts, and let us spread this light widely into the world, thereby elevating our world and bringing heaven down to earth. My father was a great and righteous man, and his light will continue to shine for eternity, lighting the way for us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, Marnie, for your words. Early in the service, I offered a reading that described stars above. So far away, we only see their light. And these are the lights that guide us, even though their time with us is done. As I hear the stories of Sidney Nelko's life, I came to very similar conclusions. What kept coming to mind was the beautiful, warm, and bright light that Sid brought into this world, that was amplified even more by the extraordinary and blessed relationship that he had with his wife, Glenn. For 59 years, they were a counterpoint to the darkness. He and the two of them, as a couple, taught us about hope and optimism and what real love might look like. And this is what their kids saw every day. And hopefully we'll transmit that to their children as well. And so too with every one of us. We too can know that the world may be tough all around us, but just like Sid, we can each choose to write our own stories. May the life of Sidney Louis Nelko, Shlomo ben Shalom v'chasia, inspire us always, and may his name always be for a blessing. Can you hear that, son? May it be God's will. Before proceeding with the rest of the service, a few notes on what will happen after we leave here today. There will be a meal of consolation this evening at Shiva this evening between 7 and 9 p.m. at 145 Walnut Street. That's in the Wolseley area. The family is also inviting visitors to the same address, same time for the next evening as well. It'll be Sunday and Monday evening, 7 to 9 p.m. again at 145 Walnut Street. If you're interested in making a donation in Sidney's honor, the family has suggested that you consider the Seven Oaks Hospital Foundation or a charity of your choice. Dr. Nelko was one of the early advocates to establish the Seven Oaks Hospital, was one of its founding doctors, an organization that always was and always, throughout his life, very near and dear to his heart. I'm going to move now towards the final two prayers before we move towards closing. The first prayer, the El Mali Rachamim, is truly the prayer of mourning. The Mourner's Kaddish, oddly enough, has no mentions of death at all in it. I'm going to do versions both in Hebrew and in English because I think it's important that we each understand the nature and the power of the prayers. Dr. Sid knew these prayers backwards and forwards and inside and out, but I think the key is it's not just the ritual of the words, but the expressions that are truly within them, and may we all walk away truly understanding the power of our traditions. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamrohamim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, Im Kedoshim Hu Tohorim, Bizahar, Harakia Mazhirin, Et Nishmat Shlomo ben Shalom V'Chasya, Shalach La'olamo, Baal Harachamim, Yastirehu B'Seter B'Chanofav La'olamim, V'Yitzror Chayim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach b'shalom al kol mishkavo, v'nomar amen. May the source of life, the fountain of all being, open our hearts to compassion and our eyes to wisdom, that we might glimpse in perfect peace and sadness the way of all things. May Sidney Nelko's memory for us always be a blessing, and may we never let the light of his love grow dim in our hearts. May we remember all his worthy and righteous deeds, that his memory be forever bound up in the bond of life. God is our source and our destination, our beginning and our end. May Sidney's death awaken us to this truth, that the bond of love we shared and share not be severed in sorrow. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We're going to move to the Mourner's Kaddish. I have given the family the Mourner's Kaddish. Jewish tradition does not limit it only to mourners. If anybody here has anybody in mind, here or elsewhere, that they're thinking of and wants to join the family in mourning, please feel free to do so. If you don't know the words in Hebrew or Aramaic, because that's what's written in, I will raise my hand every so often when the word Amen comes up. I'll encourage you to join me and say Amen. Jewish tradition says, Jewish teachings say that to say Amen, it's as if you said the whole prayer. Okay, so simply by joining Amen, you've essentially adopted it. Again, I'll encourage each of you to choose the customs that you're comfortable with. Some people believe it's only the mourners to do so. Silence is fine. Sanctifying the name of God, we honor the memory of Sidney Lewis Nelko with the words of Kaddish Yatom, the Mourner's Kaddish, and together, Yitkadal, V'yitkadash, Shemei Rabah, B'yalma divrach hirute, V'yamlich malchute, V'chaye chon, Uvyome chon, Uv'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabah Mevorach Le'alam U'lalmei Almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal Shmei Dekudesha Brichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran b'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh Shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh Shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. The last two verses in English, may there be abundant peace from heaven and life for us and Israel, to which we say, Amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us and all Israel, to which we say, Amen. We will now move towards the final act. Al Nekamoy Yavo b'Shalom, may Sidney Lewis Nelko come to his eternal home in peace. In Jewish tradition, to shovel dirt into the grave is a mitzvah, a righteous act which we do without any hope of reward. With this act, we take on the responsibility of caring for our loved ones until the very end. Our loved ones deserve to be buried by kind hands, knowing hands, sorrowful hands. You are invited to participate in this mitzvah. It is a painful act, however, one born of love and compassion for those who have meant so much to us. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. With Job we have said, God you have given, God you have taken away. Blessed be the name of God. May the name of Sidney Nelko be a blessing as we mark that his essence will never leave our hearts and souls. I'll describe the customs that we have for burial right now, and they vary from congregation to congregation, community to community. I'll ask you to choose the one that works for you. Some people choose to do 1 shovelful. Our tradition here is to go up to 3 shovelfuls for a number of reasons. Some congregations have the shovel with face up, others have it face down, putting shovel on the back. Choose the one that works for you. And by the way, there's also a pail here which I'll bring over, which has a small trowel in it with sand. So anybody who's unable to carry the earth or the large shovel, please feel free to fulfill the custom using what's in the pail to do so. There's one thing I'm going to ask of you. This is probably my custom, and that is, to take the shovel and to take, when you complete your task, to take the shovel from someone else makes it an obligation to take on that mitzvah. So I'm going to ask you, when you're finished with your shoveling, to place the shovel back in the pile. There's several shovels, by the way. We'll start with the family first. Put the shovel back down and then walk up to take a shovel by yourself. Take on the act as an act of love rather than one as obligation to honor Sidney's final journey. I'll remind you afterwards, because is that this is a time when Sidney's journey is now finished. You now have to take care of each other. This is the time to step forward over the next, traditionally up to 7 days, to comfort the mourners. Get together, let them tell their stories, you tell yours in turn. Get them to know Sidney a lot better by the stories you share. Okay, share love, share community. We've all had it done for us at the time. This is the time when we will take care of Marnie, Trevor, Claire, their families, and each other as well, because every one of us has a sense of loss today. I'll invite the family to come up first. Please feel free to take on the custom yourselves.
on Zoom every week, so she's watching joint.
River. And they used to live just around the bay.
On Forest Park.
And they live right next door. We live right next door to the house.
Okay.
I would go hockey nice.
He's a nice guy.
Hockey, I don't think this is a sport.
Yeah, my brother Sheldon, I think Sheldon.
He was goalie too?
Yeah, he did. I'll let him know.
I don't know what he's still in town?
He lives near an old, he's basically living in it. That's nice.
Happy with you doing that?
Not replacing, but making sure that it's good summer in terms of, give me the mic to travel afterwards.
Well, I'm going to go say hi to my cousins, and I'm going to go visit my mom and my dad. They're around here.
Yeah.
That was yesterday. Technically, you have to do it.
Even for giving me a dispensation, I was attempting ahead of him. Get the 3 days a day. So I did it all.
Everything okay?
Well, I hope that I haven't made the reading. Probably. It's interesting. You did a math.
Well, thank you.
Did you know?
I knew Danny. It's one of the biggest public in Canada. So it's supposed to be, you know, within a year or two. Danny Zero connection. You grew up with the stories and experience. make it easy. It was interesting you just traced the tissue because I grew up Orthodox and all the tissue. Actually, it was in Constant Park. It was in Constant Park. Yeah, that's good for you. So I thought you were at the new. I had family with. Do you remember the What you were talking to the guy? Yeah, Cantor Johnson. Do you remember the boat? Yeah. These chants it was an extremely religious family, but it's funny, the foreign actually has a very good relationship with we actually are now playing so they decided to use it.
Dave and Jack, you guys want to come right now? Back to the house?
So we've tried to be creative in terms of things like mourning tragedies generally.
We have a massive car.
If you fish about the story, fish about the reason why Orthodox shuls won't have music history, even though the temple did, because it's serious to all the time. Yeah. I mean, that's how the music and the theoretical reasons. There's that. They say the other one is if you have a string instrument, right? By the way, a lot of the songs talk about the lyre and all these instruments. It actually mentions that they use the instruments in the songs. So, but the other was, they say you're not supposed to work in Shabbat, and they say even though you can theoretically play an instrument, you might break the instrument. God forbid you should try to repair it. So they say because you might repair it, it's kind of a tricky. It's creating premises from creating a bit of a character. Yeah. So it's a footnote afterwards. Yeah, but it's kind of a way of another justification. So every one of us finds a class. I actually participated the other before Rabah. I did 4 rabbis last year on Tisha B'Av and talked about different recreations of the Tisha B'Av. So Tisha B'Av, so fasting isn't common. I think some people do, it's not common.
I know.
But it's not saying it's negative. It's just pardon me.
Oh, so I don't. No, it's not the neighbor actually